Probably the simplest and most heart-piercing, resonant thing I've read on grief is that grief is just love with no place to go. That you have all this love that we want to share, that the celebrations that kids want to do for their prom, the celebrations people want to have for their parents' anniversaries, and the connection of growing up and seeing your nieces and nephews and cousins playing together. There's all this grief we have with no place to go. And what I would challenge each of us to do is find a constructive place for that love to go. And where can you channel that grief that you're feeling to make the world a better place? Because if each one of us did that, wow, I can't even imagine the world we will come back to.
Good evening and welcome to the library. My name is David Leonard, president of the BPL and host of our Arc of History program. Tonight's conversation is part of our Arc of History Repairing America series and presented in conjunction with the Christine Business Library and Innovation Center here at the BPL. Tonight, I am coming to you live from the Central Library in Boston's Copley Square, from the Bates Hall Reading Room. No, that is not a virtual background behind me. This has been a place where visitors have pursued their research, study, and information interests since 1895. This program will be recorded and published on both the GBH Forum Network and BPL websites following the program. But before we get to tonight's guest and the main program, here now is Gregor Smart, curator of the Christine Business Library and Innovation Center, to tell us a little bit about the center and its programs and services. Gregor, welcome. Nice to see you tonight. Please take it away.
Thank you, David. And I would like to thank the Friends of Christine for making tonight's program possible. Before we get to the talk, I would just like to give take a few minutes just to talk about our resources and programs. If you haven't been to our space, we're at 700 Boylston Street on the lower level of the Johnson Building. Our focus areas for the Christine Business Library include creative software and innovation, entrepreneurship and small business, support for job seekers, and financial wellness.
Thanks, Gregor. The theme of Repairing America provides us with an opportunity to engage with issues facing our country and indeed our species, and to try to bend our arc of history a little more directly towards justice for all. Also gives us the opportunity to give voice to leaders, experts, and commentators who may not always have been afforded such opportunities. Tonight, we will be in conversation with our guest, Dr. Neha Sangwan, and we want to recognize that part of our work to repair America involves focusing on the whole person. And as we get into the topic and what we do in, during, and in the aftermath of this COVID-19 pandemic, I believe this approach will give us pointers for both ourselves as persons and in community, but equally be useful to the organization and business space, and hence the somewhat provocative title of How to Use the Disruptive Energy of a Pandemic to Make Your Business Thrive. Dr. Sangwan is CEO and founder of Intuitive Intelligence. She is an internal medicine physician, international speaker, and corporate communications expert. Her private practice and corporate consulting focuses on empowering individuals, organizational leaders, and their teams with the tools for clear, effective communication. She addresses the root cause of stress, miscommunication, and interpersonal conflict, often healing chronic conditions such as headaches, insomnia, anxiety, and depression. She regularly consults with organizations such as the American Heart Association, American Express, Kaiser Permanente, and Google, and has shared her keynote presentation on the stages of TEDx. Dr. Neha Sangwan, welcome to the program. I know we're virtual tonight, but we actually may be, this may be one of the closer in terms of geography interviews that we've done over the last year. Would you just tell us where you are, and let's get started in talking about how we as humans respond to this time of pandemic?
Yes, it's an honor to be here. Thank you, David. My guess is we're about a mile apart in Back Bay. So just right up Boylston.
Yes.
So yes, so close yet so far.
Indeed, indeed. Well, it's good to have you here.
Great. It's wonderful to be here. You know, I mean, COVID, wow. As a doctor, probably the best way that I could describe what I think we're going through is a world heart attack. So, you know, my patients would come in one at a time with a heart attack, a stroke, or a pneumonia. And what's so interesting about it is they would come in and there would be this physical breakdown in their health, in their world, in the world as they knew it, really. They never thought they'd be the 58-year-old status post heart attack. They never thought that they would be the 62-year-old status post stroke, right? Or with cancer. And in that moment, what I found was what I'm finding a little bit now in this COVID experience, which is that when we are surprised, when chaos ensues, whether it's on an individual level with our physical health, whether it's on a relational level in the breakup of our families, a divorce, a breakup, a loss of someone we didn't expect in COVID, or whether it's a natural disaster like a worldwide pandemic, climate change and the disasters that we're seeing in Texas and other places. When these events happen, the same thing happens no matter what level we're on, the individual, the we, the me, the we, or the world. And it's literally that there's this cracking open of possibility. It's almost this space that lets light in. It's for new possibility, even for our businesses, right? I mean, I think there were people who knew that the world was moving a little more virtually, but they were kind of dragging their feet and they were like, yeah, we'll get there. We got like the 5-year plan to get everything online and all that. Well, suddenly in 5 weeks, their entire business was online, right? And so there's this way that that space that cracks open allows for more awareness. It has discomfort in it for sure. But the real question is, I saw a picture of my little nephew and he was wearing a sweatshirt and it said, straight out of timeout. And I thought, wow, he's 3. And, you know, it's this reference to a rap song or a rap group. And so his mother was very cleverly putting him in it, straight out of timeout. And I realized we're in a global timeout. And just as with him, how useful that timeout is after he hits his sister or doesn't listen or whatever it is what we do in that timeout. Right. Do we resist it? And do we try to act like it's not happening? And if we watch enough Netflix, if we, you know, try to tell everybody to hold on, then we'll all be the same on the other side. That's enduring a timeout. And really what I'm advocating for is, what if we use that timeout to innovate, to let that new awareness come in and allow us to catalyze ourselves fast forward and create the world we want.
Now, I think I would characterize where we are, and you please feel free to agree or disagree, but we just passed this terrible, tragic loss of 500,000 individual human lives. Yeah. And the focus, I think our emotional focus for what is almost now about a year has been on the uncertainty and survival. Yeah. So given that, where is the space where we can look for that light that's trying to break in that you're referring to? Or is it as simple as do we, regardless of where we are, even if we've just experienced a loss, do we still try and find the place for that? Or is our tendency to push that off and wait and, you know, I'm not ready for that light yet. That's too optimistic. How do you parse all of that?
Well, that's a great question. So what I'd say is there's been tremendous loss. I would also say that as a country, the choices we make every day determine how much we'll lose beyond this. Okay. And for some people, it's been hard it's almost like we have to, when the outside world, when the president says something different than the governors say something different than the mayor says. People have said to me, isn't that awful? And I think to myself, it is much more effective in leadership when you are aligned and you're giving the same message to people. But this is what our country wanted to learn right now. This is my belief. Mm-hmm. We wanted to learn a different lesson. The lesson we are learning is, what do I believe about masks and about science? Mm-hmm. Every one of us individually is having to answer questions that often at other times in our lives, we let leaders decide for us. Mm-hmm. And in that space, it would almost be like parents in a family or a CEO of a company saying, hey guys, do what's best. Do what you think is best. Mm-hmm. And there's like, wait, I think this, right? And everybody has their own way to do it. So what we've done is when you have a respiratory borne illness, and some of you choose to follow masking and some of you choose not to. And what we've done is we've cycled up and down. We've seen progress and then sliding back. And so we're learning a different lesson. We're learning, what does every individual believe is the right thing to do? And do I believe in science or do I not? And is it worth doing this, even if it takes a year or a year and a half? Are we willing to go to the root cause of the problem? Or are we going to try and Band-Aid it? These are questions.
Are they suggesting there's an equivalence between those answers? I mean, I fully get the concept of personal autonomy, personal responsibility, but in some cases, the choices I make have consequences not just for myself, but for others. And how do we put together the value of being forced to make the choices that we might have deferred to leaders with the fact that these are irreversible consequences for others in community with me?
Yeah, what you're talking about is when I see a patient privately, and let's say they have cancer, let's say they have some diagnosis, my job is to lay out for them, this is the best chemotherapy, this is the best radiation, these are the treatment options from do nothing to do everything. In that private meeting, once I am the consultant who gives them all the information, now my job to honor what they choose based on their beliefs and their age in life and what they've been through and all of that. That's a private conversation. What you're talking about is something much bigger, which is public health. That's a different game. And I am starting to see guidelines come out. I'm starting to see ways that people are now treating this as a public health issue and I think it's much bigger than this. It is not just going to be the US. We all breathe the same air. This is the world. And we are being asked to recognize, in my opinion, to see that no matter our race, our color, our gender, our beliefs, whatever it is, our religion, we are connected and we are more alike than we are different. And so if I could think of what is the biggest lesson that's happening here, it's look what happens when we choose personal autonomy and don't pay it. So I think of this in a slide I call Me, We, World.
Yeah.
So can I show you a slide?
Yeah, please do. I know we're going to pull slides in and out of our conversation to just give a visual illustration of maybe the topics we're going to be talking about. So please go right ahead.
I am thinking this is going to help people. So this is how I look at the world, right? There's the people who only think of one of these levels, and then there's the leaders, the true leaders who can hold what I call triple vision. So if somebody, initially there's me, it's about me. And the more you learn about yourself, your own self-awareness, the more when you have something adverse happen to you, you start to ask questions, reflect, and grow. That's the foundation going downward. You're getting a preview of my next book, of course. But this is essentially the foundation. And oftentimes people do not pay attention to the physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual aspects of themselves. So it's important. Now, what's interesting and sets leaders apart is the ones who can actually also pay attention to what does my team need? What does my family need? What does my community need? And I find Boston Public Library doing that. You look at what you need. You look at, what does the local community need? And what can we do in the world? How can we make this so that anyone can access this? That's Me, We, World. And so I say, if you're ever going to really solve a problem, something adverse has happened to you, you've lost a loved one, you've gotten COVID, whatever it is. First, you want to heal me in order to serve we from what you've learned, and ultimately to impact the world. Mm-hmm. And the way that people normally look at it is they look outward first. What do you think success is? What do you want from me? Instead of first healing me, then, serving we, ultimately impact the world. And when you do it that way, the stronger you are in the foundation, the more aligned and the bigger impact you can make. So really, when you're making decisions, what I will encourage you to do, especially during this time, even if you're afraid, think about yourself, certainly take care of your own physical health and wellness, and mental and emotional. Then pay attention to those around you and ultimately our world. Because if we don't get this lesson, it's going to go on longer and longer until we do.
Great. I'd love if you're willing to go back to your own realization of the me and the we, because and I think there's a little TEDx video online where you tell this story, but you were headed down the internal medicine, bioengineering profession, and I think pretty close to the end of the degree work on that front, and then had a realization which involved a little trip to an Aboriginal community in another part of the world. Tell us a little bit about your own path on that shift.
All right. Well, I do have 3 slides here, so let me pull that up for them so they get a little bit of a visual here. Let's just say, yes, I'm a doctor and an engineer, but all that really means to all of you out there is I'm a very good Indian child. So from the earliest time I can remember, I had my dad asking me, "Are you going to be an engineer or a doctor?" I grew up believing there were 2 choices. Wow. As soon as I realized my mom wanted me to be a doctor and my dad wanted me to be an engineer, and I realized they were not mutually exclusive, of course I was going to do both. Both. So what you're speaking about is at the end of my residency. So I'm about 31 years old. I have now I'm just about to graduate, and we get to do an elective our final year. So I went to Australia to work with the Aboriginal, do some Aboriginal medicine. Really, I needed a break and I wanted to learn something completely different. While I was there, I happened to attend a retreat in the rainforest on the Gold Coast. And I was there with 27 Aussies, and the leader of the retreat, I think they were a little fascinated by me. I looked different, I spoke different. And he opened the retreat by handing me a rose quartz stone and saying, "If you spoke from the heart, what would you say?" And I was so disarmed by that question because I didn't think people spoke from the heart. I thought they spoke from their mouth. And I really was taking him so literally that it was such a reflection of my engineering and medical training. But I answered, if I spoke from the heart, what I would say, I think that I have worked my entire life to make everyone around me proud, including the Indian community. And I'm not sure that I've done all of this, for me. And I just broke down. And as I looked around, I was worried that everyone was going to be judging me, but they didn't judge me. They were actually full of compassion, and they were all paying attention and just giving me so much respect and their attention. And it was in that moment that I realized that I was the person who needed to hear myself own up to the fact that I really wanted so desperately to belong and to make the people I loved proud of me. And that I had done so much extra work, never took a summer off, always did internships. I mean, I became a workaholic young. Right. So in that space, when I came back, I then worked as a hospitalist for 7 or 8 years in the hospital. And during that time, I actually burned out. And when I burned out, it was a huge wake-up call to me. I mean, this is hilarious that as a doctor, I learned physiology, pathophysiology, anatomy, all these things. And somehow I think I'm invincible. I didn't think I had any limits. 36-hour shifts, got it. Whatever you want from me, I can do it. But what I realized when I burned out was I started researching. They put me on medical leave for 3 months. And while I was there, I thought, oh my gosh, my arms and legs work and you won't let me work. I was very upset about it. And so I started researching stress. Yeah. And I discovered that the research shows that stress causes or exacerbates more than 90% of illness. And as soon as I understood that, I thought, oh my gosh, this is the answer. When we have physically stabilized our patients, we should be asking them, what's at the root of your stress? So I went to work and I told all my colleagues, hey guys, this is what I learned. I think we're missing this. And I said, what do you think? And they said, just like you wouldn't order a test that you didn't know what to do with the result, nor would you ask a question that you didn't know what to do with the answer. And I was so upset by that because I thought we are all really smart. We've worked really hard. When have we ever been afraid of solving a problem? We usually lean into that. So I started doing it with my patients, like literally an experiment. I was like, okay, so tomorrow I'm going to be discharging you. You're doing really well. And if you answer these 5 questions, I will spend an extra 20 minutes helping you understand how you got here and how not to meet me in the emergency department again. You can meet me at the grocery store, the opera, at the library, but please not in the emergency department. If you answer these questions, the nurse pages me, I'm going to spend extra time with you. I stopped counting after 2,700 of them did it. And I thought, okay, how much more do I need to do here? They're going to do it. So this is that idea of in crisis, there's an opening that may not be there at another time. And for all of you business leaders out there, I want to make sure, and all of you that are in families, I want you to know this is a very important, dare I say, sacred moment in our world that is parallel to somebody's body breaking down and the sacred moment I felt as a doctor with my patient. So I would ask them 5 questions. And I have a slide here so that everybody can grab these if they'd like. And by the way, this is what I asked them in the hospital. And I want you to know you can ask it for burnout or you can ask it for any dilemma that's happening. So you can apply this much broader. But this is what I asked those patients. Question number 1, why this? Why a heart attack? Why not your liver? Why not your left leg? Why is this part of your body breaking down? So in your company, it's like, if you're having turnover, why are you losing these people, right? So whatever the dilemma is, why this? The second question is, why now? Why not 2 years ago? And why not 2 weeks from now? What did you need to know in this moment that this happened? What did your body want you to know? Third question, since hindsight's 2020, what signals might you have missed that are incredibly clear now? And question number 4, what else in your life needs to be healed? And lastly, question number 5, if you spoke from the heart, what would you say? And that takes me back to my Australian days, right? That was such a powerful question. And they all knew why they were sick. They all knew what needed to be done. And then I began on the path of realizing that if we don't address people's mental, emotional, social, and spiritual worlds, it ends up showing up in the breakdown of their physical bodies. And that's when they come to me asking for pain medication or whatever it is that is needed, right? And I can help them in the short term with a heart attack, a stroke, pneumonia, whatever it is. But what I find is 2 years later, they're back in with another one if I don't help them with what's underneath it. So.
And so there were those 2 moments in your life that provided the moment of opportunity to let the light in, to reflect, to have this realization. And we're talking tonight about this process and how is it possible to mediate that opportunity for someone else? Or do they have to have that aha moment, however serious it might be?
Well, it depends on how much people like to be in control and how much almost how much pain they need to surrender.
Okay.
Because what the world is doing right now is, way back like a year ago, you remember when everyone showed up pretty formally in suits and, everything was, just so, and you were proper at work and all. Now we got like dogs and kids running around, and you can see, sometimes I'm not fully, perfect on the screen. And so there's a level of informality that has started in our world. Some people are comfortable with it and some people absolutely aren't.
Mm-hmm.
One thing's for sure, the world's moving that way, right? And so the idea becomes, it depends on a scale. I think of it as a spectrum. There were some people who resisted it all the way till the end. And there were other people who were hungry and open to learn, right? And so it really depends on how much pain you need to move from needing to control things to surrendering and getting the lesson and learning and growing, right? And that's usually determined by your level of resistance. So I'd say there's a
right. And when we speak about resistance, denial is a phrase that certainly comes to mind, and one that one finds in the practice.
Yeah.
Our ability to deny reality seems to be limitless. As you talk about a heart attack or cancer, certainly denial is a part of the grieving process in that case. How do you think we're coping in light of this pandemic? Are we denying reality? Are we accepting it? Are we ready for an aha moment, for more reflection? Or do we want to not reflect now and maybe reflect later?
I'm ready. What I'll say is it depends.
Yeah.
I've had people on all ends of the spectrum. What I know is I think there's some people who are really believing that if they endure this long enough, we'll go back to life as it was. I'm not in that camp. I do not believe that we are going to go back to life as it was before. I'm a fan that if the companies that teach their people how to communicate clearly, how to be authentic, how to know who they are the ones who will elevate. Because now, as much as we used to be more formal at work and keep, home at home, leave your emotions at home and get work done at work and be professional, all of that. I think now we've taken away the in-person experience and people are craving connection. They are losing motivation, losing empowerment. And, one of the most common things I get asked is around how do I inspire and engage people from home? Right. I mean, it was hard enough in the walls of our, entity, our company. How do we do it now? Everybody's like everywhere. And, I used to worry about their productivity and now I can't control. Well, there you have leaders who love to control what was happening, who now the control has been taken away.
Right. And with no chance of getting it back, really.
No time soon. Right. Let's say that.
And it does feel like there are two large categories of people. There are those who structurally would have the freedom to ask those questions. Those who are, earning a good enough wage. Those who have means. And the other category are those who are simply surviving. We hope surviving, whether making it through on their own or making it through with help. And so does this play out differently for these two groups?
So I think we're also being asked to elevate to that triple vision I just spoke about, which is how do we take care of our needs when we know those are handled? And now the question becomes, how can I serve? And how can I help others? And how can I impact the world? What's the greatest way that I can do that? Because if I don't start doing that, one thing's for sure, it's this respiratory borne illness. We're all in this together. So our job is to help everybody on the spectrum and figure out where my gifts and skill set meet a need of the world. That's my job. If I am past physical shelter, and I am not worried about next week's paycheck to pay my bills, and I have a roof over my head, my next job is to say, who can I help?
Okay, great.
You know?
So I think and I think for the sake of tonight's conversation, we'll be focusing more in the balance of our time than on those who we can help. The conversation about who is in the survival category, who needs their Maslow's hierarchy of needs, those basic fundamentals of shelter and light and food and water. We'll save those for another time, although it'll show up in the same conversation, I think. If those of you who are watching and listening along have questions for Dr. Neha, please put them in the Q&A, and we will pick them up in a few minutes. I'm wondering if you have thoughts, Neha, on if are different generations more or less open to this level of being helped and getting at the whole person.
Wow. What I would normally say is the traditional trajectory that I used to see was, you're little and you're really open to learning your first decade. The second decade, you're kind of ramping up, but you think you know it all, right? In your teenage years. And then in our 20s, where we finally have freedom and we start to move out in the world, it isn't usually until our 30s or 40s that people would have a major, loss of a job, getting fired, divorce, something would happen and it would trigger this whole cascade of awareness. And some people much later in their career, they sailed through, right? Or in their lives. Now what I'm finding actually is, listen, by the time you're in your final decades of life, you don't have a choice because your physical body starts to break down whether you like it or not. And there's a surrendering that happens naturally as you then mirror the beginning of your life, right? So I think that used to be the trajectory. Now what I see in the younger generation, I find them to be very purpose-filled. I find them to be almost of a different energy. They were born into the 9/11s and the 2008 crisis and, all these things, and they don't see these differences. They love social media across the world. They love, likes from Saudi Arabia are as important as a like from California. Like they don't see the differences. And I think we've also left them with some pretty big challenges to face. And I think they don't have the luxury of time for awareness. So I actually do work with a whole group of teens and youth, and I did it in COVID, and it was called Next Gen Are the New World, because they are the bright lights that give me hope. And I think they are far ahead of their chronological years. So they want purpose.
Right. And most companies, most organizations are multi-generational. They're rarely, although this may not be entirely true, but they're rarely, only of one age. Certainly, the more mature organizations are. So, in what way should we be paying attention to generational differences as we look to organizations to work out, how are they going to come through COVID-19, and how are they going to come back from it if that's a different question?
So the way I think of it is through the lens of stakeholders, right? If you have all different ages, let's say in your employees, what is it that the older generation needs help with that the younger generation finds so easy? Technology. Right. So are there ways for the needs in your company to be met by creating connection between the different levels? Now, what also levels of experience, what also comes here is judgment and values. So I'll tell you in medicine, in the world of medicine, the older generation is like, you know what? We had 36-hour shifts every third night. Like, just quit acting like you need your sleep and all this stuff. It's overrated. And so there's this bravado to pushing through our body rather than partnering with it. And I think the next generation is here to tell us, I don't think so. That sounds crazy. And what we thought was normal, we need to wake up and realize is not human. And we are the ones who learned physiology. We know that, a healthy body runs on feedback loops, whether it's hormonal feedback loops, cycles, circadian rhythms of our body, night sleep, waking in the morning, not switching it all up, right? We know this, but yet we decided for a period of time that we were going to push through it, and we were going to make our self-worth dependent on how hard we worked and how little we slept and how many admissions we did last night, whatever it is, right? We tell our war stories. Well, the next generation, they're not impressed. They're not impressed. And what if, instead of us judging them, what if we came together and we believed that we actually have values that we can share with one another, and everybody has something important to bring to the table? And when you do have those discussions and you facilitate them in a really good way, everybody starts to find a little bit more of themselves.
Mm-hmm. And I know you use the concept of conflict as a way to diagnose organizations or interpersonal dynamics that are not going well. And if I'm right in what I've read, you don't believe we're good at conflict. And that's probably certainly true cross-generationally as well, just to continue from our previous point. So what role does conflict play in either unhealthy resolutions or just not getting at resolutions that we need?
Well, this is really big. This is big because what you're talking about is whenever we're in crisis, whenever we're in a situation that we are unfamiliar with, right? The most basic function of our brain is to seek pleasure and avoid pain. That's like really simplifying it, right?
Yep.
And in that space, it depends on how conflict has been handled in your family and in your past. Mm-hmm. If you were someone who saw your parents, your siblings sit you down, have a conversation with you, allow you to feel your emotions and express yourself, and then helped you come to some resolution, you felt like you had choice, you felt like you had some input, right, you're going to be at a very different level than somebody who has lost a job, lost a relationship, saw it go badly, lost friends, got bullied. If you have had any of that experience in your past, you will avoid conflict like the plague. Mm-hmm. And so when we're in this world where things are changing really fast, the inability for you, your teams, your family to be able to handle conflict leads to people stuffing all their emotions down. Sometimes they can do it successfully, but it's usually until they explode. Mm-hmm. Or there's people who just explode right away. They're like, okay, stop it. And it's their way of keeping conflict at bay. Okay. And so there's different ways. There's more ways than that, of course, but those are the big ones, right? The people who go silent and try to avoid, or the people who blow up. Mm-hmm. And so in that space, what we need right now is a space of creativity and innovation. Mm-hmm. Moving forward. So without the ability of you, your family, and your teams to be able to navigate conflict effectively, right, it's going to be tough.
Right. I'm going to start picking up a couple of questions. We had some from earlier, and we have some coming in at the moment. And just to play off that last point, and this is from an anonymous viewer tonight, a wise friend suggested that the pandemic is teaching us to slow down and let go of personal ambition. Does that ring true in your experience?
Well, I guess it would depend on the definition of personal ambition. What I would say is that my interpretation of this would be that the pandemic is teaching us to slow down and get clear on what matters most. Mm-hmm. And if for you, it's personal ambition, then I would ask you, what does that look like? What does that mean? Mm-hmm. Who would you serve? What would you accomplish? And who is it for? Right? So to me, there's a few more questions there. It certainly could be a very noble thing to have personal ambition. I would just need more clarity around what that is so that somebody could know whether they achieved it or they didn't and what they were working for. I think certainly reflecting on what matters most to each, this is actually triggering me to think of this. In the decade, more than a decade in my training, residency, and then my 7-8 years in practice,
Right.
I have to tell you, from my early 20s to my late 30s, I got a front row seat to the end of this game. I sat at the bedside of thousands and thousands of patients who were willing to tell me what mattered.
Mm.
And I will tell you, it only comes down to a few things. No one ever told me they wanted more money. No one ever told me they wished they'd worked harder.
Right.
No one ever told me any of those things. They wanted to know, was I loved?
Yeah.
Did I love well?
Right.
What were my regrets, Doc? And do I have enough time to repair them? And if I do, would you help me? I've never had the courage until now, but I know my time is limited.
Yeah.
And so it was really more about connection to self and others and the impact that they had made, and whether or not they felt that it was more self-serving or whether they felt like their legacy would impact others after they were gone.
Right. I mean, I do like the sentiment behind this question, and I want to take it one step further, because I think it's another level of diagnosis of the current condition. So, many of us used to commute to a workplace. We would have time. We would have, more explicit boundaries about when work stops and when work and when non-work. We can talk about that distinction also, stops. But I see this in colleagues and friends, that rather than use this freed time, this found time for the type of reflection that maybe the questioner was getting at, or that you are looking for us to do, we fill it with more work, or we fill it with more projects. Why are we doing that?
So this is a really important question. It's to stay busy so we don't have to feel.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden there were coping mechanisms, there were routines we had in place. Sometimes there were marriages that stayed together because I left and traveled as much as I did, right? There's ways we've set up our lives to have a certain amount of distance that works really well for us. There's strategies, getting up, maybe working out, leaving for the office, being out all day, and then coming back and having an hour with my kids, right? Like, I don't know what it is for whoever, it's different for every person. Yeah. Whatever those strategies were that have probably some very unconsciously, not even, you didn't mean to, it just kind of happened. Like, this works. And if it works, we're going to keep doing it. Right. Well, all of that got disrupted. All of that got disrupted. And so there's all this discomfort, right? And I want to say that the personal ambitions, I do think it is noble. I think it's noble to get clear on who you are and what you want that'll make you happy. Yeah. In this experience, I think it's, give me your question again. I think I just lost your question.
So the why do we fill this time that should have been freed for nobler purposes? Why are we filling it with more stuff?
Yeah, so that oftentimes, I guess the best way I can say is, if you're a doer, if you're somebody who always needs to be busy, if you're a thinker and you always have thoughts going, oftentimes they are to avoid us from having to feel. And when we're in the space to slow down and to be it, that's why we limit it. I mean, hey, we're going to go on vacation for 7 days. I'll be back. Like, I can do this. We can have fun. Even that is a form of, like, how do we control this? But now, when we're not in control, when something has changed and we don't know for how long, right? Emotions start to surface in the quiet moments. The things we've been avoiding, right? They're here now. And that's what happens in reflection. And that speeds up that whole awareness place. And so there are some people who are busier than ever trying to hold up the old norms and rules and the way that things used to be, right? And there's a nobility in that. They're working hard. And you want to ask yourself, what's driving this? And if I slowed down, first of all, do I think surrender is a swear word? Because some people do. But do I think that would just be the worst thing ever, right? It's a sense of control that we're allowed to keep.
Yeah. I'm not going to let this go yet before we move on to something else, because there's not only are we doing this with our freed commute time, but we used to socialize, we used to go out with friends, so we're actually taking the social quality time. And I think not sure how to repurpose that either. And I think we're quarantining with our families, with kids, with pets, with a husband, wife, partner. And I wonder what that's doing to relationships in that context as well.
Well, I think it's dismantled a lot of our ability to avoid what's real with them. And in that moment, it's time to ask, is this who I'm supposed to be with?
Yeah.
Am I happy here? Have I outgrown this relationship? It's the stuff that makes people, a little nervous, and so when this goes back to us talking about denial, this goes back to us talking about awareness. How aware do I want to be? Right. And I think that, some people said, oh, this will be 3 months and it'll all go away and it'll be done. Well, a year in, we're looking at a good few more months to a year.
Right.
And as we do this, it's teaching us patience, and it's giving us time to reflect on, is this the life I really want to lead? Am I in it? And am I in the right life? So I think it's a gift, but it doesn't mean that it's easy.
Right. And it means we have to accept the gift, and we have to unwrap it, and we have to decide what to do with it. All of those are stages.
Yeah. What are we ready for?
Right.
Because you can stay busy.
There's this next question I'm taking changes tack a little bit, takes us back to, your analysis of medical school and training and what that prepares you for. Kathy asks, how do you think medical school training would change if medical students were taught the 5 questions that you cited, or this approach to stress, or fill in the blank?
Yeah. Well, you'll be happy to know, Rachel Naomi Remen has a program. I don't know if it's called the Healer's Art, or I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it's in medical school, teaching like 80 medical schools around the country, teaching compassion and connection to the next generation. I cannot think of anything more important. What I would say is you also have to change the structure of what we have to endure while you teach us this, because in the craziest way, I'm sorry to say this, my time-tested equation was 2 ice cold Mountain Dews plus a king-size Snickers bar got me through 36 hours without any sleep. And if at that time you were having me do these shifts and then teaching me about being connected to my body, I would say, like, thank you, but like not now, because I need to get through this. And it's the same thing we were talking about. We're not asking people who are surviving right now to now go to a higher level of, what do I want with my life? They want to know where their next meal's coming from. And so we would transform medicine if what we did was, one of our biggest issues in medicine is about, I guess I would say the trillion or multi-trillion dollar question is, how do we engage our patients to make the right choices for their health when they're not in our office? Well, I think if we were busy using this sacred opportunity, this sacred moment, not just to write a prescription that said, take this pill 3 times a day and see me in 2 weeks, but we use that time to have this discussion with them, I think we would not be asking the question, why are they not following the recommendations?
Right.
They would be inspired. They would be engaged. It's the same thing with your workforce. If right now you find them unmotivated, disconnected, disempowered, don't get rid of them. Ask yourself, how do I use this sacred moment to inspire them, to engage them, to help them grow, to feel connected again? They're in a crisis. And the question is, what are we going to do to support them in this crisis?
And during this virtual period, there's opportunity to ask questions that you wouldn't normally ask in that context. A manager to an employee, a leader to an executive team, a doctor to a patient.
Yeah. I mean, even the question, how are you? The question, how are you, before COVID, I expected someone to say, fine, thanks, how are you?
Right.
Now, when I say, how are you?
Mm.
It's like expected that you're going to tell me, you know what, we've been struggling. I lost someone to COVID.
Right.
You know, it's a different level of connection that we have. And that's what I mean about the single most important thing I think people can do right now is learn to be with their emotions, learn how to navigate their emotions, and learn how to navigate conflict within yourself and between you and others. Without that skill set, as our climate changes, as we have natural disasters, as we have global pandemics, as our work world changes, you're not going to survive without it. So the question is, what are you doing to up level, right, your ability to navigate the pace of change? Because this is the slowest it's going to be.
I mean, it was already accelerating prior to COVID. And potentially explains a little of the unrest and uncertainty that we are seeing around loss of purpose in the country, or reactions to terrible killings and other forms of political and civic and social events that are terribly destabilizing, many of which had been there before, but perhaps are, with new technology and new awareness, more seen.
Really, it's about transparency.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean, that this is the slowest we're moving.
Yeah.
Because the things that could be hidden no longer are, right? And so the deal is, how do we, the internet started it in the 90s, which was like, all of a sudden, it turned things on its head. It's like, as a doctor, what went on between me and a patient in a room, if they complained about something, maybe an administrator read it or whatever, but the doctor, not much happened to us. Now, you can write a Yelp review publicly and tell the world what you think of me. And I have no recourse.
Right.
And so when there's flips in the power structure that are going on in society that started way back when with the internet, it's like, we haven't equipped physicians to be able to handle public feedback that's negative, well, the world's here and it's going to change. So your job then is to equip your people.
I want to get in a couple of minutes to what the next few months or year might look like. I mean, we know we don't have a crystal ball, but I'm going to go there. But let me take Carolina's question, which is really about the work from home environment. People that are working at home, especially women with small children, are finding it very hard to work. I certainly see the statistics where more women are leaving the workforce, perhaps semi-permanently, than men, and so I believe this to be a fact. What should companies be doing to identify if this is worker burnout or something else?
Okay.
I think there's actually a couple of questions loaded in there. Right?
Now, thinking like, where do I start here? All right. How about if I give the group, I'll go and I'll define burnout so they know what it is and what to look for.
Great.
And then we can move into ways to empower people from home if you want to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think it's that there's a particular challenge for women per se, and there's a particular challenge with small children, and if you're the primary caregiver or the only caregiver. But yeah, let's start with the burnout piece.
Well, one thing I have to tell you that's really interesting about this is I'm starting to see partners step up.
Okay.
And really, hey, I can't have a call at 6 o'clock because it's my time for child duty. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, this is really, it's not just shaping our work life, it's shaping home.
Right. And
when we get this much of a load, right, I'm starting to watch people really share and kick in. So let's start with a little bit on burnout here. What is burnout? So how do you diagnose it here, right?
And this can be in the workplace or it can be in one's personal life, right?
You won't. And really, I want you to know, if it's not you, it might be in someone you lead or love. So just keep it in mind, learn it, and recognize it, right? So there's a triad of burnout. And this is the easiest way I can explain it to you. It's like, yes, physical and emotional exhaustion for sure. So that's what we normally see. And we say like, oh, are you burned out? But it's more than that. Burnout also includes this component. So when I burned out, I remember now that I was looking back, you know, that whole hindsight's 2020 question, the third one,
Sure.
like, what do you see now that you didn't see then? About a week earlier from when I actually burned out, I was on call, and about 2 a.m, a nurse contacted me for a patient who had spiked a fever. That's why I'm on call. That's why I'm in the hospital. I answered the phone and I had not gotten a wink of sleep. And I answered the phone. They're like, okay, you know, the patient 232 is spiking a fever. And I was like, really? Like, really? Like, it's 2:30 a.m, like, really? And I found myself this is the second part of the triad of burnout. I found myself cynical.
Mm.
And when I become cynical about the very job I signed up to do and worked 31 years of my life to do because I cared about it, now you know you're going down a different path. And finally, literally ineffective, where one day I walked in and I had only seen 2 patients by 11 a.m. and I'd already been there 5 hours. And I said to the nurse, hey, Nina, could you please give 40 milliequivalents of IV potassium to the person in, you know, I don't want to use names, so I'm going to say bed 636. And she said, Dr. Sangwan, are you okay? And I said, yeah, why? And she said, because that's the 4th time you've asked me that same question. And I had no idea. That's ineffectiveness, right? And so burnout, physical, emotional exhaustion, cynicism, and then ineffectiveness. So that's how you're at burnout.
And ineffectiveness could be, you know, something that makes no difference, or it could be a negative impact as well, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what it is you are now not able, you are starting to falter. Like, you are not able to do this. And as a doctor, I mean, there's huge consequences. I could have written the wrong medication. I could have done something. Thank God nothing like that happened. And then here's the deal. People say like, oh, I was just fine last week, and this week I'm burned out. That's not how burnout works either. So let me talk to you a little bit about the phases of how you burn out. The first phase of burnout is the alarm phase. And the alarm phase is almost like you just getting on a treadmill that's moving a little too fast. You know, that moment when it's like, oh, adrenaline rush, and you're like catching up to get up to that speed. That's the alarm phase. Now, for many people, that alarm phase, they've been on that treadmill since they were 22, okay? And that becomes adaptation, where you now start to adapt to that level of functioning and you think it's normal. Now, many people spend their entire careers and their entire lives here. If you don't, and then one more thing, you know, you don't rejuvenate, and one more thing, COVID, you know, the death of someone you love, losing your job, something happens. Well, that's when you go straight down the third phase of exhaustion. What I want you to know is your body doesn't do it all of a sudden. It's been doing it for a long time. You've just been hitting the snooze button on all the signals that are coming. Because initially, right, you get a little twinge in your right shoulder, let's say. If I ignore it and I push on through, pretty soon my neck and I'll be getting a headache. And if I just pop some Advil and just keep working, more Zoom calls, please, right? My upper back will start aching. And if I push right on through, my body's going to have no choice but to hit me over the, you know, head with a 2x4. And I'm going to wake up with my back out the next morning and not be able to do anything. And the best part is I'll be surprised by it all. Right? So we got to pick up these signals earlier so that we recognize them instead of viewing our body as a nuisance that's stopping us from doing more.
Is it possible to just keep coasting with all of those 3 factors going off? I mean, or like what's the additional thing that makes you go, okay, no, I'm exhausted. Yeah, sure, I'm a little cynical. Maybe I'm not as effective as I used to be, but the choice of changing is maybe too big.
Yeah. And so you either get to decide whether you want to be the one to decide when change happens, or you want the world to decide for you. That day when I burned out, that nurse decided for me.
Got it.
Right. And so I pushed all the way through. I couldn't even imagine. Like, listen, I've done this. I've worked really hard my whole life. What do you mean I can't work hard? I can keep going. So it's how dense I was. And it took me all the way until ineffectiveness to recognize what was going on. I have to say, it is the biggest gift I ever got. It changed the trajectory of my career. It taught me where there are gaps in our learning and our understanding of this phenomenon. It changed the course of my life. So in the end, I didn't think it at the time, but what a gift. What a gift.
Well, congratulations, because you, A, on recognizing it, and then B, this last period of your life appears to be incredibly successful. And are you happier as well?
Yeah, I would say not only am I happier, I am more purposeful. I'm more aligned with my gifts and skill sets. I'm a root cause solving girl. I'm a woman who was an engineer. I want to make sure that if somebody's coming in and showing me a problem or whatever it is, as a hospitalist, I saw them for a very short period of time. And then we had continuity of care. So if they came in again, they would be assigned to us again. And probably the most frustrating thing for me was to realize they were in a revolving door and they kept coming back. And so now what I feel, they used to ask me, actually, this is interesting. And I resisted even them. They used to say to me, Doc, this has been so incredibly helpful. Why was the price? Why are you not out in the corporate world helping people 20 years before this happened? Why was the price of meeting you a heart attack, a stroke, or a pneumonia? And I'm embarrassed to tell you, my answer to them was, because this is what they pay me to do. They pay me to clean up things afterwards. They don't pay me to help prevent things. And after 7, 8 years of me saying that, I thought to myself, Neha, are you just too scared to go out there and pave that path? To, hack down the jungle and make a path for this. And I think a little bit of both of them were true. I think I was paid. I was a partner and I was tenured in for life, and I didn't want to give up those golden handcuffs. And I don't want to fail either. And so there's this part of me, if I leave all of that, what if I don't fly? Right.
And, let's take this burnout back to the questioner. So the specific context was what, was there some particular version of the warning signs that apply, I think, to women working from home and women with small children?
All right, so let's I should have kept going. So let's talk a little bit about what signs and behaviors you're going to see in each of those phases. So alarm phase, adaptation phase, exhaustion phase. Okay, so here we go. In the alarm phase, hold on, we're gonna go to the next slide.
Let it build. Right.
Yeah, let it build. The alarm phase. What are you going to see? You're going to have some fatigue, right? You might notice physical symptoms like your heart palpitating. Mothers are going to say, I feel this stuff all the time. What are you talking about? You're going to start being up at night a little bit. And you might have some intestinal issues. There's a lot of nerves in your intestinal tract. You might start to get anxious and you might start snapping, right? At people where you normally didn't. You might feel sad and overwhelmed, right? You might not know the difference. Like, isn't this just being a mom too? Like, yeah, sometimes it is. But here's where things change. You're a person who always gets things done, but now you're missing deadlines. You're raising your voice at the first time someone asks you something, not the third. Right? You find yourself blaming others. You're getting up early and you're working late and you're not able to recover. Right? Starting to lose your confidence in yourself because you're stronger than this. You're a better leader than this. You start to judge yourself, right? Then when you move from alarm into the adaptation phase, now you're procrastinating. Now you're withdrawing socially. You're getting that cynicism. You might even move all the way to apathy, like, I don't care. And once you're starting to do that, you're starting to detach now, right? And oftentimes it can move into addiction, like drinking more, all sorts of things. But if you're using anything you're using, right? let's say it's as simple as, retail therapy online or binging Netflix, whatever it is. The way you know that it's a problem is when you ask yourself, why am I doing this? Am I doing this because I enjoy it? Or am I doing it to avoid something else? If you're using it to avoid something else, there's the danger. That's the danger signs. And then there's exhaustion. That is, that's extreme fatigue, meaning you have an entire weekend off, maybe even more, and batteries are not recharging. You've now have debilitating physical symptoms. You're feeling depressed, right? And it can go all the way to feeling suicidal.
And, I think certainly the characteristic of this last stage would be, is it affecting your ability to function, but base function at work, base function socially?
Well, that's all the withdrawing. Now you're calling in sick, right? That's when you're really in trouble. And I just want to say, any of these symptoms that we're on here, I want to make sure that the very first thing you do is get them checked out by a health professional. And you see if there's something physical going on with you.
Sure.
If there isn't, then you're paying attention to the signs of burnout once you have a clean bill of health. And I have this if they want it. If they want all the warning signs, you want the, all that stuff, you can get it at drneha.com/burnout signs. You can have the whole handout and videos on all of this if you want it.
Great. And we'll make all of the links available in the recording when we post after the session as well. Sure. Just a reminder that we'll put up the buy the book slide just to give people a reminder of your existing book where you can read about the 5 steps. But also you're working on your next book as well. Is there a little clue you want to give us about what to keep an eye out for?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I'll give them some of the let me share the 6 main drivers of burnout. I think that would be a fun one because let's go there. Because it might not be what you think it is. A lot of times people are afraid of burnout because they think that it means somehow that they've done something wrong. Let me tell you that the research really shows that it's about both organizational and personal factors and the fit between them. Yep. So it is not like my fault for burning out, right? It's that if I burned out, I missed some signals and the environment in which I'm working is not suiting how I work, right? So here's the 6 factors. This is a little preview. So it's workload, right? So the solution for this is not just less work, right? Research actually shows that people want a challenge. They want to be challenged, but they also want to have the capacity to meet that challenge, whether it's the tools they need, the time they need, the support they need. So people want to work hard. They want to learn and they want to grow, but they need to be able to they have the capacity to meet the challenge. The second one is, the second factor driving burnout is the organizational fit around control. So really you want to ask people, how much flexibility do you have, right? How much input do your teams actually have on the decisions that affect their everyday workflow, right? Their schedules, all of that. You want to help this, give them more control. Otherwise they do burn out. Third is recognition, right? Everyone needs to feel valued and appreciated. And the question is, it's not just at the annual meeting, it's every day, because you have everyday heroes in your organization that if they do their job well, nothing bad happens. And what are the unique ways, especially in COVID, that you're using to help them be recognized? Another one is community. And it's the strength and the sense of community that people feel between their colleagues and their leaders. And the important thing is that people can endure a lot if they feel cared for and if they feel that they care about the people they're with. They can transcend a lot of adversity. So make sure that that's strong. The 5th one is fairness. And this is a huge one because this is around the transparency of decision making. And if somebody doesn't feel that the decisions are being made fairly, or they're not in the presence of like impartial and ethical practices, their energy will deflate immediately, even if it's how you chose to recognize people, like the previous one, right? So that's really important. And then lastly, meaning. And so what this is about is what matters. And the company's going to say they have these espoused values, right? And if there's incongruence between somebody's work environment and the espoused external facing values of a company, that's a big factor that makes people burn out pretty quickly. So that's a little way that they can start to understand better.
We actually had one question come in that relates to one of those principles, the community one. The question is, some people who need to foster connections and community, because that's what they need, often just aren't open or open-minded to do so. Do you have any thoughts or recommendations about how to help someone in that predicament, or it's themselves, perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you're talking about, really, you're talking about self-trust. And oftentimes people have had experiences where it wasn't safe to be connected. They can't trust people because someone betrayed them, because something happened, right? And they learned at a much younger age that it was better to do it alone. Go it alone. And if I go it alone, I have more control, and I don't have to deal with my vulnerability being in somebody else's control. And so what I would say is, in that situation, it's about starting small, and it's about building trust. And if you are, I'll tell you, there were 4 different work styles. We're not going to get to them, but let me talk to you about a person who may not be as open to connection. So let me show you this real quick.
Yeah, and the other point of that question was that our society, and particularly American society, is very geared to the individual and individual success. So there's that dimension to this that's an inhibitor too.
Yeah, well, this is about teaching your people about our basic work styles and how, instead of judging each other for the different way we do it, how can we actually be inspired by leveraging the power of our differences? And so, a doer, let's just say a doer. Someone who's a doer would be very much about tasks, accomplishment, getting things done. The more, the better. How do you know them at the gym? Because they're on the elliptical machine while they're listening to a podcast as they're reading the paper. It's all happening.
Right.
The other thing about a doer is, what kind of car would they be if they were a car? Well, they'd be a Hummer. Okay, they're going to get from point A to point B, and nothing's going to get in their way.
Okay.
Wow. What's their greatest fear? Their greatest fear is vulnerability. And when you start to understand that there's 4 different types and their fears are all different. Let me just skip to the second one. I'm going to give these guys just an overview of the 4. Here's the thinker. Okay. The thinker moves a little slower than the doer because they love numbers. They love analytics. They often like being alone. And they like to solve complex problems and think through all the different ways that something could be affected. And so the important thing here is, at the gym, them because they're tracking all their reps. They like the data, and they like things done in a certain order. So if a machine's being used that they want to use next,
they're going to wait.
I'll wait. Now that would make a doer crazy. They would be like, oh God, like that, do the next thing. And why are you wasting time? Well, if they were a car, they'd be a Prius. Why? Because someone's thought about the environmental impact, the cost effectiveness, the carpool lane. You've thought about it all, okay? Now, if you move down, we have 2 more. There's the seer. And the seer is the visionary. Their currency is possibilities and what's next and innovation. And they're the ones camping out for the next iPhone for a day and a half before it actually comes out, right? They're the seers. And the seers care about, they're fun to have at parties. They like color, and they're the ones who have cool socks. There's like something unique about them, right? And if you're paying attention, you'll notice. Now at the gym, they're going to be walking into the belly dancing aquatic class, like whatever's new. Okay. And they're going to have a matching outfit and bathing suit as they go in. They're going to look good doing it, right? And if they were a car, they would be a Tesla truck.
Right.
Because they're going to be the most cutting edge. It's going to be a little flashy, right? The whole thing. So their greatest fear, is of being trapped. They like possibilities.
Yeah.
So anything that makes them come into an agreement, give a deadline, everything the doers love.
Yeah.
The seers are going to be like, no, and we got to leave it open because what if, right? So going back to the thinkers.
We didn't do their vulnerability, I think, right?
Yeah, that's their vulnerability. We didn't do the thinkers' vulnerability. And the thinkers who want to get it, do it once and do it right, their biggest vulnerability is looking foolish. So they're not going to risk with new people, and they're not going to be doing all this stuff because it's safer with numbers. It's safer with space and time. Let me get the right answer, right? So that's why they might not be so into that. And then last, let's talk a little bit about the feelers. Well, the feelers, they are the glue of the team. And so they're the ones who are going to make sure everybody comes along together. Their currency is relationship and connection. So they're going to know before you might even know that you didn't participate in the meeting, right? They're going to say, how come you didn't say anything? They're going to have a pulse on the people. And if they were a car, they'd be a minivan because they don't care how we get there as long as we all go together.
And hopefully have a good time getting there, right?
Yeah, they care about the journey. And they're going to move a little bit slower than the fast seers and the fast doers, right? Because they care about the connection. And their greatest vulnerability is of being rejected. So where they're going to struggle is kind of going out on a limb, bringing up a controversial subject or an opposing view, right? So when you start to understand the different ways that we're all wired, and we use this time as a way to educate and elevate each other, we can now celebrate our differences, because people might say, well, which is the best one to have on your team? And what I'd say is, here's the answer. The answer is the best teams are these ones that have at least one of each on them. Because what you're going to do is you're going to think through it. It's going to be well thought out. It's going to be innovative because the seer's there. You're going to make it on deadline. And by the way, everyone's going to feel included in the process. So that's what I'd say.
We're just at about 7:20, so we can go a few more minutes. I promised we'd get back up to the bigger picture in terms of, okay, we're in this pandemic. Maybe there are lights at the end of the tunnel. We know we're probably still going to lose a lot more people, but we can see lights at the end of the tunnel in terms of, in some parts of the country and the world, the COVID numbers appear to be going down. There are still causes for concern, of course. We see vaccine availability coming. I'm going to use this phrase that's awful, the new normal. How do we not squander the opportunity that is being given to us now? This is like our global heart attack, to use some of your analogy early on. This is, the possibility of thinking about what matters. Are we just going to rush back? Is our workspace going to be, we're all going to go back in person? What are we going to look for in terms of social community? What are we going to look for in terms of in-person community? Will it be back to normal? Will it be different? No crystal ball, but what do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think the world's already different. I mean, I think that whoever knew that loving someone would mean you didn't see them, you didn't hug them, and you didn't go to their funeral.
Yeah.
So our world has already been turned upside down. If we decide not to get the lessons for ourselves individually or as a world community, I believe this will go on longer. I believe it'll go on longer until we get the lesson. So I'm a big fan of saying, let's figure out what lessons each of us need to get to heal ourselves, right? And what can we do to help each other? And how can we come together as a world community? Because the faster we get this lesson, the quicker we get to hugging and connection again and celebrating together. And by the way, I hope we never go back to not having Zoom parties for people's birthday. I love everybody being there at once. Like, let's have a real party where people are here that can make it. And let's make sure we have a Zoom party too. So how is it that we're going to take what we've learned and what was even better about this and brought us closer and merge it with the things we love? And is there a way that we can learn to let go? And I really want to just leave this question with one thought, which is grief. You know, people have said that there's 5 stages to grief in the research, and you know, denial, and it's called DABDA. There's a whole, you know, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance, right?
Look up Elizabeth Kubler-Ross for all the details, right?
Probably the simplest and most heart-piercing, resonant thing I've read on grief is that grief is just love with no place to go. That you have all this love that we want to share, that the celebrations that kids want to do for their prom, the celebrations people want to have for their parents' anniversaries, and the connection of growing up and seeing your nieces and nephews and cousins playing together. There's all this grief we have with no place to go. And what I would challenge each of us to do is find a constructive place for that love to go. And where can you channel that grief that you're feeling to make the world a better place? Because if each one of us did that, wow, I can't even imagine the world we will come back to.
And with that note and that hopeful note, I just want to say thank you so much for this great conversation, for sharing your experiences, your thoughts, your slides. And I truly wish all our viewers, whether you joined us live tonight or whether you're watching later on, that there are some gems of wisdom that resonate with all of our viewers, that will make the I better, the we better, and the world better. So once again, Dr. Neha, thank you so much.